Montana Territory, May 1879. The calf was dying. Aurelia Vaughn knew at the moment her fingers touched its fevered side. The little creature lay curled under the slant of the barn roof, sides heaving, eyes cloudy. She had been up since first light, skipping breakfast, hands raw from the cold morning dew as she hauled buckets of warm milk and mixed the tincture her father taught her to make before he passed. She was alone now, just her and the few head of cattle she had left. The calf gave a soft, broken bleat as she sat beside it in the hay, cradling its head in her lap. "You are not dying on me," she whispered, voice thick with strain. "Not today." She reached for the dropper bottle, her hands trembling as she tilted the liquid into its mouth. Behind her, the barn door creaked. She did not hear the horse, did not hear the boots, but he was there. Yates Nolan stood in the doorway, holding his hat in one hand and the reins of his gelding in the other. He had come for water from the spring that ran behind the Vaughn property, same as he had every week since the snow started melting. But when he saw her knees in the straw, skirts streaked with mud, hair slipping from its braid, he came no farther. He just stood there, watching her. The wind outside rustled through the broken slats in the barn wall. The calf gave another weak sound, and the girl-woman really leaned closer, her expression fierce and tender all at once. Yates had been a cowboy since he was 16. He had seen stampedes and broken legs, seen men die in the dust without a word. He had never once looked at anyone and thought, "That's her, that's the one." Until now. Aurelia did not notice him until she wiped her hand down her dress and turned to reach for a rag. She froze when she saw him. "Who are you?" Her voice was wary but not frightened. "Yates Nolan," he said, stepping in, slow and easy. "I water my horses at your spring. I saw your barn door open." Her eyes dropped to his boots, dusty but clean, no threat. "Is the calf sick?" he asked. She nodded. "Came down sudden yesterday. Fever's worse today." "Want help?" She hesitated. Then she shifted aside just enough. Yates knelt beside her, his broad shoulders brushing hers as he reached for the calf. His hands were steady, calloused, but gentle as he checked its gums, its eyes, the heat behind its ears. "You did good," he said. "You gave it the right medicine. I learned from my father. He was a cattleman. Where is he now?" "Buried behind the house." Yates looked at the small graveyard through the barn gap. 3 crosses, one larger, 2 smaller. "Your family?" he asked quietly. "My father, my mother, and my little brother Samuel." She turned back to the calf. "I stayed. Could not leave the land, not after they worked so hard for it." Yates nodded. He did not fill the silence. After a while she said, "You from town?" "North of it. Nolan Ranch sits near the river bend. I have heard of it." "Big place?" "Too big for one man." She glanced at him, curious. "No family, not anymore." The calf whimpered again. She reached to stroke its head. "I think he will make it now," Yates said. She looked down, saw the calf's breathing had eased. Her shoulders sagged, all the tension draining from her frame. She did not cry, but her hands trembled. "You stayed with it," he said. "Of course I did." He watched her for a long moment. "You are not like the folks in town," he said. "Is that a bad thing?" "No," he said, and his voice was low. "It is the best thing I have seen in a long time." Aurelia flushed and turned her face away, but she did not move from his side. The sun slipped higher, the dust in the barn glowing like gold. Yates stood and offered her his hand. She hesitated, then took it. He pulled her up gently, like she weighed nothing at all. "You got anyone helping you out here?" "No. I could come by, once in a while, lend a hand if you will have it." She looked up at him. He was tall, lean from work, his eyes a soft shade of hazel that caught the light like dry grass in summer. "I could use some help," she said. He smiled. "Then I will come back tomorrow," he said. He touched his hat, then turned and walked out into the light. Aurelia stood in the doorway after him, watching as he mounted and rode off, the dust rising behind his horse's hooves. The calf stirred at her feet, stronger now. She looked down at it, then back at the road. For the first time in a long while, she felt something settle in her chest. Not hope, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Yates returned the next morning with a sack of oats and a coil of fresh rope. He found her out back, mending a fence rail that had splintered in the last windstorm. She didn't hear his horse approach over the creak of wood, but when she straightened and turned, her gaze met his like she'd been expecting him all along. "You're early," she said. "You're already working," he replied, dismounting. She held the hammer loosely in her hand, thumb smudged with pitch. "You didn't say what time." He set the sack down near the barn and walked to her slowly, like he knew better than to crowd a woman who lived by her own strength. Fence could use a second pair of hands. She passed him the hammer without a word. He took it and knelt at the broken rail. She stood nearby, arms crossed, watching. "You always carry oats with you." "Not always," he said, "but I figured you're stocked below." She lifted a brow. "You figure a lot, Mr. Nolan. Only what's plain to see." Aurelia narrowed her eyes at him, but she didn't argue. Instead, she bent to hold the board steady while he nailed it back in place. Their hands worked close, fingers brushing briefly. She didn't flinch. When the rail was set, they stood side by side, looking out over the pasture. Grass was coming in soft and green, spring's promise just beginning to show. A red-winged blackbird darted across the sky, silent. "Your place runs quiet," Yates said. "I like it that way." He nodded. "Anyone else ever come out here?" "Only when something breaks or someone's lost a steer." He looked over at her, then leaned on the fence. "You prefer it that way, too?" She didn't answer at first. Her gaze drifted toward the cottonwoods lining the creek. "I don't mind company," she said finally, "so long as a man doesn't expect me to talk more than I want to." "I can keep quiet," he said. She glanced at him, and something flickered in her expression, half amusement, half something else. "Can you?" she asked. "Give me a chance, and I'll prove it." She turned to head toward the barn, calling over her shoulder, "Then you can help carry water. The trough needs filling." He followed without hesitation. Inside, the calf was on its feet, nosing around the corner stall. Aurelia dropped the bucket and knelt to check its ear. Yates watched her without speaking. She moved with purpose, not tenderness, though there was care in her every motion. "How'd he do overnight?" he asked, held steady. "Got up on his own this morning." "Appetite came back, too." He nodded, then stepped around her to lift the second bucket. "That's good." They carried the water together, moving in rhythm. No wasted steps, no fumbling. Afterwards, she led him to the tool shed where she kept her seed sacks. She opened the door and stepped aside. "I've got barley and corn, but the ground's still too wet to sow. I can bring a drag harrow next week. Once it firms up, you'll want the weeds turned. You have one," he shrugged. "Borrowed from a neighbor. He's got a new one now." She studied him closely. "You always do this much for folks you barely know?" "No," he said, "just you." She leaned against the doorframe, arms folded again. "Why?" "Because I see what you're doing here, and I don't think you should have to do it all alone." A long silence stretched between them. Then she said, "I never said I couldn't manage. I never said you couldn't." Their eyes met again, and this time neither of them looked away. Later, they sat beneath the cottonwoods, sharing a piece of dried apple cake she brought out from the kitchen. The bark at her back was rough, and the ground damp, but she didn't seem to mind. He took slow bites, letting the sweetness settle, watching the way the sunlight filtered through the new leaves and lit her face in dappled gold. She said, "My father didn't think most men were worth trusting." "Was he wrong?" "Sometimes," she said, "but not often." He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "You think he'd say the same about me?" She didn't answer right away, but when she did, her voice was quiet. I think he'd wait to see what you do next. Yates folded the last bite into his palm and stood. Then I'll be back Thursday, with that harrow. She nodded once. As he walked to his horse, she stayed seated beneath the tree. He didn't look back until he was in the saddle. When he did, she was still there, watching him go. He tipped his hat once, then rode out. She stayed in the shade for a long time after, fingers brushing crumbs from her skirt, eyes on the road that led west. By the time Yates brought the harrow, the ground had dried enough to take it. The soil turned dark and rich beneath the iron teeth, yielding without much fight. Aurelia walked the field's edge, eyes narrowed against the wind, watching how the rows formed behind him. The sky held no clouds, but the air carried the bite of late spring. Her shawl clung to her shoulders as she moved, boots sinking faintly with each step. When he reached the end of the row, Yates dismounted and walked the length of the field toward her. His shirt clung damp to his back, streaked with dust. She met him near the gate, pulling a tin cup from her satchel and handing it over without a word. "Cold from the well," she said. He drank slow, then wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You got good land here." "I know," she said. "That's why I stayed." He looked out over the rows he'd just turned. "You planning to plant all this, just the far half? I haven't got the seed or the help for more." "I can bring barley seed next week." She eyed him. "You offering to plant it too, if you'll have me?" Aurelia studied him a moment, then nodded once and turned back toward the house. He followed, leading his horse. The quiet stretched easy between them, the kind that didn't press for filling. Near the porch, she paused and looked out toward the ridge. "You ever see wild horses up that way? Sometimes near dusk." "Why?" "There's a gray mare been ranging close lately. No brand. I think she was loosed, not born wild." "She let you close?" "Not yet. But she watches me." Yates leaned on the hitch rail, thoughtful. "If she's been handled before, she might come in. She's got foal lines down her belly, might have lost it. That'll make her wary. She's not the only one." Aurelia's voice was quiet but steady. He didn't answer right away, just nodded and looked out toward the hills. After a moment, she asked, "You ever break a horse that didn't want you near?" "I have." He glanced her way. "Took time, patience, and not forcing a thing." She looked at him then, really looked. "That mare comes down close to the barn some evenings. If you're still coming by, you might see her. I'll be here." That night, he didn't linger, just made sure his tools were stowed and mounted without being asked. She stood on the porch, arms loose at her sides, eyes following him as he rode to the main road. He didn't wave. She wouldn't have wanted that, but she watched him until he was gone from sight. The following week, he brought the seed. They worked side by side, his hands filling the drill sack, hers guiding the furrows. They didn't speak much, but when they did, it was about crops and topsoil, about the way the wind turned before a storm. After the second row, she stopped and leaned on the handle of the planter. "You've got calluses where a rancher keeps them, but your boots are new. They wore through last month. I bought these in town when I sold off 6 steers. You sell often, when the herd thins itself or the price is right." She nodded. "Smart. What about you?" "I haven't sold in 2 seasons, not enough stock to spare." "You'll get there." She didn't answer, just bent back to work. That evening the mare appeared. Aurelia had just finished scraping the last of the ash from the stove pan when she stepped out to throw the bucket. The wind had gone still, and the ridge lay golden in the dying light. The mare stood 20 paces from the barn, head high, legs motionless. Yates came from the shed, wiping his hands on a rag. He stopped when he saw the animal. "She's finer than I expected," he said. "I've left oats for her 3 nights running. You think she'll take from your hand?" "Not yet." "But she doesn't run. She's watching you." Aurelia didn't take her eyes off the horse. "I know." After a while, she said, "You hungry?" He looked over, surprised. She added, "I've got beans on the stove and half a loaf." He nodded. "I'd be obliged." They ate at the small table inside, the lantern swinging faintly above them. She spooned out his plate without ceremony, and he took it with a quiet "thank you." The walls were lined with shelves, most holding jars of preserves, some dust-covered. A worn oil painting of a river bend hung above the hearth. He noticed her hands as she ate. Not soft, not dainty, but steady. The hands of someone who'd made do with little and built more from it. After the meal, he stood and cleared the dishes without being asked. She didn't stop him. When he set the last plate aside, he turned to her. "You've got a good place here, it just needs time. So do some people." He held her gaze. "I've got time, Aurelia." She didn't ask what he meant. She didn't have to. Outside, the wind had picked up again. The mare was gone. But inside, the warmth held. The rains came soft in June, slow and steady, soaking into the fields until the barley rows stood taller, greener. Aurelia kept a ledger now, tucked beside the kitchen stovepipe, where she scratched figures with a stub of graphite how many hands of seed sprouted, what sprigs the cow took to, how many eggs the red hen laid since the warm spell began. Yates never asked to see it, but she noticed how he glanced at the page when he passed her shoulder. She didn't mind. He never corrected, only nodded sometimes, as if he saw what she was building and already knew it would hold. One afternoon, while the clouds hung low and the horses stood hip-shot in the pasture, he brought an old drawknife and set about shaping new handles for her wagon's yoke. The old ones had begun to splinter, and she hadn't yet asked for help. He hadn't waited for her to. She came out with a mug of coffee still steaming from the pot and held it out. He sat cross-legged in the dirt, wood curls gathering in his lap. "You always make yourself useful?" she asked. He blew across the surface of the drink. "Only when there's work worth doing." She leaned against the porch rail, her sleeves rolled, nails rimmed dark from weeding. "I figure you've got enough at your own place." "I do. But I've got enough help there now. My cousin moved west from Dakota this spring, brought his wife and 2 sons. They've taken to the cattle better than I did at their age." "That why you started riding out this way more often?" He looked over at her, eyes steady. "No, that's not why." Aurelia didn't answer, just watched the wind stir the trees past the creek. She'd never met a man who didn't fill silence with boasting or questions. But Yates had a different kind of stillness, one that didn't press. After a while, she stepped down from the porch and crouched beside him. "I've thought about selling the mare," she said. He looked up, surprised. "She's let you touch her." "Only once. She came near the salt block yesterday, let me brush her shoulder before she pulled away. She's choosing you." "I don't have time to break her." "You don't have to." "Not if she's already decided." Aurelia ran a thumb across a sliver in the handle he'd shaped. "You think she'd follow if I saddled another horse?" He nodded. "If she's watching you close, she'll go where you go." She stood and brushed off her skirt. "Then maybe I'll ride out tomorrow." "See if she comes." "I'll ride with you." She hesitated. "It's not a task for company." "I'm not company," he said. There was no jest in it. She looked at him a long moment, then gave a single nod. The next morning they rode out before sunbreak, her old gelding and his bay walking easy through the wet grass. The mare waited at the far edge of the pasture, near the aspen grove, her ears flicking but her hooves still. When Aurelia passed beneath the low branches without looking back, the mare followed 10 paces behind. They crossed the shallow part of the creek and moved into the open hills, where the grass was longer and the breeze smelled of sage. Aurelia never said a word, and Yates didn't try to. The mare kept behind them, calm and unhurried. Just before the ridge, Aurelia pulled up. "This is far enough," she said, her voice low. The mare stopped too, head lifted toward the breeze. Yates dismounted and waited. "She's not lost anymore," Aurelia said. "She just needed somewhere to belong." He stepped closer, but not too close. "Same can be said for folks." She looked at him then. Really looked. "You plan to keep riding out, even when the planting's done." "Even if I don't always need the help. I don't ride out for the work." "Then what do you come for?" "To see you," he said. "And to stay if you'll let me." The mare took a step forward and brushed her nose along Aurelia's shoulder. Aurelia reached up, steady and sure, and laid her hand along the mare's cheek. "She chose," she said softly. "So did I," he said. She didn't turn away. Didn't ask what he meant. She already knew when they rode back the mare stayed close, and so did he. That evening, Aurelia fed him stew by lamplight and passed him a folded quilt for the spare cot, though she didn't say much. But when she banked the fire and turned down the wick, she paused at the doorway. "You want a place here," she said. "You'll need more than words." "I brought tools," he said. "I'll bring lumber next." She considered him, then nodded once before stepping quietly into the dark. Outside, the wind blew soft through the barley rows, and the mare settled near the barn, where the light spilled faint through the cracks. Inside, Yates lay on the cot with his boots by the door and his hat on the floor, listening to the quiet house around him. He'd found her tending a sick calf in the still cold of morning, and he'd known it then, though he hadn't had the words. Now he didn't need them. The mare took a name first. Aurelia said it without thinking one morning as she ran her hand down the animal's flank, checking for heat or swelling. "You'll be Juniper," she said, voice low and even. "You've got that look about you." Yates, stacking cut cedar for the new lean-to behind the barn, caught the name and said nothing, just nodded once as if it had already been decided. By mid-July, the lean-to stood solid against the barn's east side, the stall walls planed smooth under Yates's drawknife, and the roof tight against summer storms. Juniper took to the stall with little fanfare. She wouldn't eat from anyone's hand but Aurelia's, but she let Yates brush her neck now, so long as he didn't look her in the eye. They worked quiet most days. Mornings started with sorting feed and hauling water, followed by fieldwork or repairs. Afternoons were for mending or baking, or the slow turning of soil where Aurelia planned to start a tobacco patch. The days lengthened, then began to draw back again, and the barley in the fields turned gold. One evening, as the last of the sun slipped behind the far ridge, Yates stood on the porch sharpening his knife. Aurelia sat nearby, winding coarse thread through the toe of a boot that had split along the seam. The air was thick with the scent of wild mint and dry earth. "You never asked me to stay," he said, voice quiet. "You never gave me reason to ask." She didn't look up. He let the whetstone rest on his thigh. "I've been thinking about selling off the rest of my share. To the cousin, he'd take it." "Already said so." She tied off the thread and bit the end clean. "What would you do with the money?" "Put it into lumber, maybe another milk cow, a second plow team." She set the boot aside and met his eyes. "Here," he nodded once. A long silence stretched between them. "I don't want a hired man," she said. "I'm not asking to be one. I don't want a partner either, not in the way they talk about at the general store. I don't want that kind of arrangement." She leaned forward, elbows on knees. "Then what are you asking?" The whetstone slid into his coat pocket. "To build this place with you. Start from what's already here and make it more. I'm asking to stay, Aurelia, not for a season, for good." She didn't answer right away. The wind had gone soft, and the air held the hush that came just before the first crickets stirred. She stood, walked to the porch steps, and looked out at the fields. The barley swayed like a sea, and beyond that, the cottonwoods whispered. "I buried most of what I loved in that ground," she said. But it's still home. It can be more than that, he said. She turned, and her voice didn't waver. You sure? I've never been more. She stepped down off the porch and crossed the yard without a word. He followed. They walked past the barn, past the lean-to, past the soft nicker of juniper settling for the night. They reached the little hill behind the house where the crosses stood. She stopped there, hands folded in front of her. I don't want them forgotten. They won't be. She looked at him, and for the first time her face was unguarded. Then stay. He stepped closer, slow and sure. His hand found hers, and she didn't let go. That winter they added a second room to the house. Yates built a hearth with river stones, and Aurelia lined the mantel with dried herbs and jars of lye soap. The mare foaled in early December, a pale-legged colt with a bold stripe down his nose. Aurelia named him Flint. They were married in the parlor with only the circuit preacher, Juniper, watching through the window, and a ribbon from her mother's sewing box tied at Aurelia's wrist. No lace, no fanfare, just a hand held steady through the vows and a promise that didn't need much saying. Yates planted corn come spring. Aurelia added 2 hens and a cream separator. The barley grew taller than ever the next season, and the tobacco patch took root by the fence line. They never left the land. Never needed to. Every evening they sat on the porch and watched the wind move across the fields. No words most nights, just the hush of a place held together by hands that knew work and hearts that had waited long enough. And when she leaned into him, when her fingers found the seam of his palm, he always turned toward her, quiet and sure, like he'd been waiting his whole life for that one moment to arrive. They lived their years slow and steady. Nothing grand, nothing loud. But everything was built true. And they never spent a single day apart.